Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Squirtle Squadron. I'm glad to see you. I'm not in my usual environment. I've been kicked out to the shed because of our lovely new puppy who is barking and having a wonderful time inside. So enjoy a new background if you've been here before. And I'm going to be talking about questions to ask your technology team. So if you weren't looking for Douglas Squirrel or the questions to ask your tech team, please go somewhere else. I hear Mr. Beast has a new episode of Beast Games, so you can go enjoy that. But if you came here to look at me and to talk with me about it, I'd sure like to hear from you. So would you mind going to the chat and just saying, hey, I'm so-and-so from this place. Tell me where you are. Tell me what brought you here. I'd just like to know who's out there. So it's always helpful. And I really like it when people ask me questions, right? So I'm going to tell you what questions you can ask your technology team. I like when people on these streams ask me lots of questions and interrupt me and say, no, Squirrel, you're wrong. That won't work. I tried that yesterday. So please argue with me. Please bring up questions. I would love to hear from you. So please let me know you're out there. Please say hello as I give a little bit of an introduction to the Squirrel Squadron. Hi, Maria. Nice to see you. Toronto. Excellent. I remember going to Toronto when it was 40 below zero. I thought I would die. So, Maria, I hope it's not that cold. I hope you are wrapped up warm and you're ready to ask some tough questions of your technology team. We'll get started on that in a moment. So, Laura, my fantastic community manager, has up at the bottom our nice little chyron there with the events that are coming up. We do these every week in the Squirrel Squadron. I guess I should tell you what the squadron is. I forgot. The Squirrel Squadron is my community, totally free, of tech and non-tech executives, and they're discussing and debating and having very interesting conversations all the time. You can see some of the events that are coming up. These are always free. This is my way of giving back. This is, I do this for free because I want people to participate. I want people to learn from each other. We have a forum as well where people are discussing all kinds of interesting topics. We were discussing DeepSeek, which is the new large language model competitor for ChatGPT. So I told everybody not to panic. It's not the end of the world. The Chinese are not coming for your chat conversations. You're safe. We talked about what bandwidth meant in a team. So what could it mean for a team not to be able to think about too many things? I was arguing that was overthinking it. So lots of interesting discussions. We got about 3,000 people now from all around the world. So loads and loads of different folks in all different industries, all discussing how to make tech most profitable. And it is not a tech forum. It's not discussing Kubernetes and bits and bytes and all kinds of other things like that. We're discussing how to use technology and how it's valuable. Nushin, great to see you. I hope I'm saying your name right. Great to see you join the squadron recently. So welcome. To various folks who are here scrolling up my screen on the chat. I may not catch everyone. Right. So what I'm going to talk about today is how to ask your tech team questions. And I want to start with a story. I have lots of stories. It's usually what I do. And I want to start with a story of something I invented in desperation. So it was my first CTO job. Oh, Laura, we can drop the chyron. I don't want to distract everybody. Thanks, Laura. But I was in desperation. I was really at the end of my rope because my engineers kept building the wrong thing. I don't know if any of you have ever noticed that sometimes software developers don't build what you actually need. Shock, surprise, amazing fact. Well, that was happening to me a lot. I was the CTO of a small company servicing the biggest banks in the world. Those banks were not very happy because we weren't building what they needed because we didn't really understand what we were doing. And I kind of understood it, but I had tremendous difficulty explaining it to the engineers. So I discovered a way to figure out whether my engineers were really connected to the business results. And I'll tell you what it is now. If you want an illustration of it, go and find your nearest 4-year-old. And now the 4-year-old is not the developer. I'm not infantilizing them. I'm saying you are the 4-year-old. And here's what it sounds like. You say, what are you doing today? That's a kind of question 4-year-olds ask a lot. And the developer might say, I'm building a new login screen. And you might say, why are you doing that? This is the 4-year-old part. And the developer says, well, I'm building it because, we need new passwords. We need to get better security for our customers. And I say, why do we need better security for our customers? And the developer says, well, I guess because, they're banks. They need secure logins. And I say, why do they need secure logins? Why do we need to provide that to them? And I keep going like this. And I called this the why game. One of several things would happen. either the developer would eventually get to something like, well, they want to pay us lots of money for that. They value it a lot. It means they will save a lot of money. It means they can enter new markets. They can do new things they couldn't do before, our customers. And they value that. They want to pay us. If I got to money, I was happy. If I got to anything else, like it's a best practice, I read about it on, a website, and it was a good idea. It's the thing that everyone is doing. Those are not good reasons to do software development. And it's what gets a lot of people burnt, is they go out and build all kinds of stuff that nobody has ever connected to an actual business reason. And the developers themselves don't know why they're building it. Therefore, it's very hard for them to tell whether they're building the right thing, and it's impossible for you. I should emphasize, by the way, the questions I'm going to suggest here are not ones that require any technical knowledge whatsoever. All of us can be a 4-year-old and ask why, right? You can ask why again and again. It's very mechanical. It's very easy. It's why 4-year-olds do it. They're practicing conversation. You can do it in order to figure out whether your developers can follow the chain all the way back from some technical thing they're doing, which might not make a lot of sense to you, all the way to something that is business valuable, that you could explain to your board of directors, that makes sense to your investors, that makes sense to your customers. And if they can't get there, you, and in my case, when I was doing it, I have lost the why game. And I would say, sorry, I haven't communicated this well enough. Let me explain to you. Let me help you with the chain. So you've got it. And now I know that I need to tell everybody that. And then that would inform me for how I was then informing the rest of the development team. I'd say, wait a minute, guys, we don't understand what our new security initiative is about. Here's why we need to do it. It's because some of our customers were in the front pages last week having been hacked. And we need a message to them about how we're secure. And that's the business reason why they want to pay us lots of money to make better security on our login screen. That would be the kind of explanation I'd give to everyone, because someone had not been able to answer the questions, and therefore I had lost. I hadn't communicated correctly. Another good thing is, of course, the developer can win. Only the developer can win. Only I can lose. That was how I set it up. And if you play the why game and the developer wins, you're very happy because that developer understands. And then, of course, you ask, could you explain that to some other people, please? Because you've understood it. You've got all the way from what you're doing to the reason why you're doing it in business terms. And that's tremendously valuable. That makes a huge difference when the developers understand it, because then they can say things like, you just asked me to make the password much longer. That's actually going to be less secure, because long passwords actually can be less secure. People tend to write them down on notepads, right, and stick them on their monitors. So it's better to suggest passphrases, for example. That's one of the things that a developer might know that a business person or a product manager or somebody like that might not. And suddenly we're having a very useful discussion about the business result, right? What we want is better security. What we're doing is not going to make it more secure. And there are lots of examples about like that, where people built lots of software thinking they were accomplishing one goal, and they weren't accomplishing that goal at all. So I hope that's a helpful first notion. I have a whole bunch of them here and lots of questions from you. So I want you to throw questions in the chat as you hear me, as you think about things, as you reflect on why it is you came here. If you play the why game with yourself, why are you listening to me? I assume there's a reason. You want to ask your tech team something. There's something you'd like to understand better. There's something you'd like to explain better if you're a technical person yourself. And I'd love to help you with that. So throw that in the chat. I'm just going to carry on through some examples of great questions that I've seen. And then I have some questions some of you sent me before this. So I'm going to make sure to cover those as well. So we got lots more coming. But the first one is the why game. So by all means, I suggest that one is the simplest. Anybody can ask why a bunch of times. The only thing you need to have, which all of you have, I'm sure, is the ability to pick up, hang on a second, this doesn't sound like it's headed toward anything that's business. No, wait a minute, this one has tremendous business value. Let's go for that. Let's try to get the developers doing more of that one. So as long as you have that kind of ability to sniff business value, then you're going to be able to play the why game. Now, here's one that's going to be completely surprising to you. Then many of you will say, what on earth is Squirrel talking about? Is he smoking the wrong thing? Is he up in the night crazy? Because he's telling me to read code. Yes, I actually mean you take lines of code, pieces of that actually make the software, the little commands that actually the computer follows in order to do what you tell it to do. And I'm telling you to read that. Now, what most people say who are not technical is, my God, I couldn't understand that stuff. It's written in Greek. It's written in ancient Latin. You know, what on earth does this mean to me? I don't understand it, and I don't want to. Why should I spend a lot of my time mastering this kind of dark art, this witchcraft of writing code to instruct a computer. It's really hard, and most people are not interested in doing it. They want the result, but they're not that interested in actually participating. And they're right, except that there's one type of code which should be easy to read. Now, if it isn't, that's telling you something else is wrong. And so we should be paying attention to that. Let me describe what this is. What we're looking for is things called unit tests, or really any kind of test that the developers will most, you'll sound best to the developers if you say, I'd like to look at your unit test. Now, they're going to look at you funny, just like you're looking at me funny. And they're going to say, you want to read code? What are you talking about? If you're a technologist and you're listening to me, you're saying, you want me to show my boss the code? You want to actually try? Do they know Python? Do they know Ruby? Do they know Haskell? What am I doing showing code to them? Well, your unit tests are the pieces that test very small bits of your functions. They're very small pieces of what your software does. Like, for example, checking that a password has the right length, or checking that it doesn't contain the word password, or something like that. Just take an example of what a unit test might do. A single unit test would verify one assertion like that. It'd be very simple. Well, guess what? Typically, if they're done well, those have meaningful names. So the name of the test will be something like, check password length is greater than 10 characters. Now, whether you think that's the right test or not is a very interesting question, but you could understand that. And guess what? If you actually read what's in it and you have an engineer sit next to you and explain some of it, they can explain at least the simpler logic. There's some fancy things you might not understand about mocking and parallel execution and weird stuff like that. Don't worry about that. The basic guts of the test are going to be something like put in a password that's too long and have an error, right? That's not that difficult to figure out. Those steps aren't that hard. And so if you have an engineer sit next to you and go through some of the tests, you can quickly figure out whether we're testing the right kinds of things. So, for example, if we're supposed to be making our login page more secure, for some reason I've picked that as today's example, if we want that outcome, but the word password doesn't appear in any of our tests, we're probably not doing it right. If we have a bunch of tests that seem to be verifying very onerous, very complicated pieces of information that our users are not ready to use, we're probably going to drive down usage, make it more secure, but fewer people will use it. The extreme is I built software at one point in my life for 8-year-olds. And being a kind of naive person, I wasn't very smart. Still not all that smart always, but in this case, I at least learned my lesson. I said, let's have big, long passwords. Let's have them learn how to be really secure, because we had financial data for these 8-year-olds. And somebody said, actually, Squirrel, why don't we use emojis? These kids just learned to read a little while ago. Maybe they're not ready for a 17-character password. Maybe we could have smile banana monkey, and that could be their password. And that was actually more secure. That was a better idea, because the kids would actually remember it. It wouldn't always just be going off to ask mom and dad. So in all these cases, you can find out this kind of mismatch, the kind of thing that the developers are doing that they shouldn't do, and you can find it out very quickly by reading the actual code, the actual tests that developers have that verify what the software is supposed to do matches what it actually does. What a great idea. Now, you might get to your engineers and they say, actually, we don't have unit tests, or we don't have tests for that thing, or we don't have tests that cover this thing, or we don't have very good tests. That's all really good news. I mean, it's good news in the sense that it gives you something to work on, because it's dangerous news. It's a real problem if there's nothing verifying that your software works. I was just literally on a call with someone whose technology I'm evaluating, and this person said, we really don't test anything. We kind of believe that it works. We check the code as carefully as we can. We look at it and make sure that it does all the right stuff as far as we can tell, and then we ship it, and we have people use it. Thankfully, they're not doing something involving safety, so they're building something that is financially important, but doesn't, nobody's going to get hurt or fall off a cliff. But man, it did make me very nervous when I saw that they had no mechanism, not even a human testing mechanism for verifying that their software did what they thought. So if you want to verify that your engineers are doing the right thing, maybe you played the why game, you think they're aligned, you think they understand what to do, and you want to check, are they doing it right? Have they misunderstood? Go and read some code, read some tests, make sure that they name them in a logical way. If their tests are named test 1, test 2, test 3, test 3, test 4, guess what? They won't know what the tests do either. That's not going to help them. If they at least name the tests well and they make the logic of the test easy to follow, because tests are generally written in something that's kind of like English, you can follow the basics of it, and then you're pretty well off. Some of the engineers in the audience may be saying, squirrel, what about gherkin? What about cucumber? There's a bunch of different tools, all named after various vegetables for some reason. And these tools are supposed to help people write their own tests. Don't do that. Read tests that engineers have written. Trying to write your own gets very messy very, very quickly. If you do something that kind of captures where you click and captures what you type in, maintaining those is very difficult. The people have tried it. It's very challenging to do. What I'd recommend much more is that you say, look, guys, you figure out what the test should be and bring me in, or a product manager or an expert of some variety who comes along and says, okay, now what we ought to do is we ought to verify that this number is bigger than 0, but it's less than 1 million, and that it ends in a 7. Whatever the rules are, and you can check that in the tests. Okay, so that's another question you can ask is, where are the tests? What do they say? Do they test for the right thing? And that's a question almost any engineer can answer. And again, you don't need super technical knowledge. You don't need to be a superstar or Superman in order to ask those kinds of questions and understand the answers. Okay, so I'm going to invite questions again. So I always love it when you guys ask me questions, but you don't have to because I've managed to generate lots of good questions from you. And I'm going to jump to some of those, and then I'm going to jump back to some of my examples. So who have we got here? We've got Maria, who says, how do you handle situations where you don't fully understand the technical context, but still need detailed answers? Can you share examples of well-asked technical questions? Well, I'm doing that, so I hope I'm doing that right, Maria. If you're either here live or you're watching the recording and I haven't given you examples, tell me. But I'm going to deal with your first question, which I think is great. Situations where you don't understand the context, but you need more detailed answers. The first thing you say is to the engineer who's giving you very detailed technological answers with words you don't understand and referring to things that don't make sense to you, stop the engineer, interrupt. You can say, if the engineer works for you, you can say, hang on, I'm directing you to stop. I want you to stop. If you need to be a little more polite, you can say, hey, could I come in with a question? I'm getting lost here. Could I just come in with a question, or could I clarify something? And so what you can do there is make sure that they actually explain each word or each concept or each test or direction or feature, whatever they're doing, in a way that is non-technical but still makes sense. And they may have trouble with that. That's difficult. But the good news is you can keep iterating on that. So you can come back to someone and say, hang on a second, I'm not sure I actually know how big a gigabyte is. I know it's big, but in this case, I need to know, because you're telling me it's very expensive to store a gigabyte's worth of data. And that's surprising to me. I'm not sure why you're saying that. And that would be a very legitimate question, and it would be very good for you to stop the person. You have to get them to stop talking first. That can be hard with some engineers. I know that. But you have to interrupt, and you might have to be forceful and say, stop. Now, the thing I didn't understand was this one. Tell me in business terms. Now, the reason I did the why game first is because sometimes people don't understand business terms. They don't understand what your business does, why it does it, why they're building the feature they're building. If you're asking them to stop and explain the technical context in non-technical terms, and they don't understand the why game, they don't understand what they're doing and why, you're in a world of trouble. So if they start wandering off and you really can't follow them, stop, play the why game, make sure that they understand what the business context is, and then use that language. So you might say, for example, well, I know you're doing something with databases and security, but I haven't understood what you told me. Can you tell me, how does that impact our customers getting hacked and being on the front page with insecure passwords, which is what I think you said you were working on? If you can ask that kind of question, not in a nasty way, but in a way that might produce a little conflict. They might say, well, why don't you understand? Well, I don't understand because I'm not an technical expert. That's the kind of approach that I recommend you use. Stop the engineer, ask them to explain the word that you don't understand, and repeat as much as you need. You may have to do it a bunch of times, and you may have to play the why game a few times in order to make sure you're aligned. I haven't seen many cases where that doesn't work, but if you have one, throw it in the chat, throw it on the forum if you're watching this later on a recording. Very happy to cover some of those. Maria says that's helpful. Excellent. Good. I wasn't sure if you were the same Maria, so glad that I could answer your question. If you have more, please ask more right here in the chat or follow up on the forum. Let me take another of the questions we got submitted ahead of time. James has a great one. How can you avoid introducing expertise-based confusion? I love that term. I may steal that, James. When you use metaphors to communicate technical concepts. Now, this happens all the time. All this work that people are doing today with artificial intelligence and chatbots and so on, there are more analogies than you can shake a stick at, and they get very confusing very quickly. And a lot of them don't match the actual reality. So people will talk about the chatbot thinking about something. They're doing the chain of thought, and they're doing more. The machine that you're using, the ChatGPT tool or whatever it is engaging in reflection and coming up with answers and so on. None of that's happening, right? The metaphor is the machine is trying to produce the next word. It's word by word. It's like Dickens getting paid by the word. That's all that's happening inside a large language model, for example. Now, when you have highly technical people describing a complex idea, they're going to wander off into the weeds. They're going to get confusing to talk to. That's where we're going to stop them, as I was just advising, and get them to kind of come back to earth. But James is saying, how about when I do it? How about when I am the expert and I'm using a metaphor to communicate a technical concept? Let me think of one. So if I wanted to describe, I know, I was just doing working with a company in the U.S. that analyzes businesses and their inventory and their prices and things like that. So they take the data from the business, they give back that data with lots of value added, and the people can ask questions like, should I sell more of widgets, or should I sell more blue widgets or red widgets? Which one is most popular? Those are the kinds of things that this company does. And the analogy you could use there is that this is someone who's building a bridge between your data and insights. Now, that's a very natural analogy to use. People understand what bridges are and they know how they work. But what you're actually building has nothing to do with bridges. And I have had this happen, believe me. You might say, yes, we're building a bridge between these two things so that you can get across it and you can learn more. And somebody says, well, where are the struts? Where are the supports? Where are the beams? Where are the trusses? And you say, hang on. It's not like that. You've misunderstood my metaphor. This is almost impossible to avoid, James. So I wouldn't worry about making sure you don't introduce it. What I'd worry about is actually addressing it and mitigating the problem. When you have used a metaphor in an attempt to understand communicating something you know well, and somebody else is confused, they kind of got the wrong end of the metaphor. They're looking at the bridge and they say, what are the planks that make up the bridge, rather than think about what can we get to go over the bridge? What kind of data do we need in order to get the kinds of insights that we want? If I want this graph showing who's buying more of my widgets, I need to make sure I send across the bridge the right piece of information. That's the metaphor you're trying to do, but people are not getting it, and that happens a lot. So my recommendation there is to iterate as much as you can. Check frequently and early whether or not the thing you're describing is too much technobabble. And it's really hard for the person who knows the information to avoid that. That's why I'm saying don't worry about avoiding it completely, getting rid of it so no one is confused. Let them be confused a little bit, but find out quickly. So you come back to somebody after just a little bit of a description. You say, man, I'm trying to build that bridge between our data and our insights. And the person hasn't understood it, and you say, hang on, stop. Before we get too far down, before we get too far into this discussion, let's get a different example. Let's get a little more information. Let's get a use case, the case where this is actually happening, and then we can talk about how we can get the right insights into our red widgets versus our blue widgets and how the graph will look. If you can get people on more details, then that usually makes the metaphor much clearer. So, James, I hope that's helpful. I'm happy to look at a specific example with you if you'd like, but I hope that was a good picture of how you might address metaphors. Use them by all means. I use them all the time to describe all kinds of things to non-technical people and help them to really grasp why. I was saying that the market for large language models is like the railroad market in the 1900s, because we're building out all these tools for doing all these kinds of things, just like there were railroads that went to all kinds of different cities. You don't care who's providing it. You don't really care who put down the rails. You care about whether your train's on time and whether it's taking you to the right place and whether it has heat. Those are the things you care about. That's to do with the operator and what service they give you. You don't really care about the rails. And similarly, we don't really care whether it's DeepSeek or ChatGPT or Anthropic or something else that provides the tool. We just want the right tool. We want the answers we need, and we want the ability to save money by having some computers do some things that humans used to do. That's the benefit that we want. Now, that's an analogy which I don't think confused anyone, but if it did, by all means, shout, say, hey, hang on a second, that's a case where you were trying to explain a technical and business concept with a metaphor and it didn't work. That happens. You just need to recover from it quickly. James, I hope that's helpful. Let me jump back to another type of question, which is very helpful. Now, this is one that also came up in the evaluation I was just doing, and it reminded me of a great story. So one of the things you want to understand when you're evaluating a tech team, you're looking at their processes, you're looking at ways to improve them, as I'm often doing, is you want to think about what are the risks, what are the problems, what could go wrong here, what is going to melt down or not work. And one of the ways to really get hold of that effectively is to ask what happens next. So if I do this, then what will happen after that? So, for example, I had a team that I was helping and coaching, and what we wanted to do was figure out how we could mitigate different kinds of things that could make our system fall over and nobody could go to our website. Because if nobody goes to your website, nobody buys anything. That much I know. And if nobody buys anything, that's bad for your business. That much I also know. So I looked at this team and I said, well, what could go wrong here? And I was asking myself that question. And once I'd figured out some things that could go wrong, I said, what happens? How will we know? How will we recover? How will we deal with it? A little bit like what James was saying about, how do we handle metaphors? I said, be able to recover. Well, how do we handle our database stops working? How do we handle the people who are providing us prices or inventory or products? Those people stop sending us that information. Do we fall over in a heap? Do we still take orders and we kind of fix them up later? What do we do in various kinds of situations? And that's the question to ask your techies. So you go to them and you say, think of all the different kinds of things you can think of. You're probably better at this than you think. What happens if this doesn't keep sending us that piece of information? What happens if the user clicks this button multiple times? What happens if is the kind of formula that you use. Now, the funny story I have about this company is e-commerce. It was coming up to Christmas, and we were trying to figure out all the things that would happen when loads and loads of people showed up on our website and they wanted to buy, in this case, personalized material, personalized items. And so they'd be typing in a name and they'd be typing in an address and other stuff to be personalized. And then they'd have an order and a payment, and like everything could go wrong in this process. And we were looking for those kinds of things. We made a big list, and then I actually had us test it. And the way I had us test it is by pretending something had gone wrong and making sure we knew all the different ways somebody would know about it. Somebody would assign someone the problem, somebody would investigate it, and then someone would provide a fix so that problem would stop happening. And we did that by having little scripts, and they were just little pieces of paper I'd cut up, and I'd handed them out to different people, and they were called the parsnips papers. Parsnips, some of you might not be native English speakers. I don't know it in any other language. It's kind of like a turnip, and a cross between a turnip and a carrot. It doesn't taste too good, but it was my silly example because I happened to have some parsnips. I bought some for some cooking I was going to do, and so that day I had some parsnips in my hand. And I said, folks, every time you pull out your script, you're going to say parsnips. Because also, we did not sell parsnips. That was not the product we had. So it was very unlikely people would say this word. And so they were trained them all, and I had them all do their little scenario. And somebody would walk up and say, parsnips, I can't get on the website. And that meant nobody had to run off and actually fix the real website. It meant we are testing what will happen if the website fails. This is the question. What happens if? And so we would practice that, and somebody would report it, and they'd report it to the wrong person. And that person would say, parsnips, I have no idea what to do with that. Why don't you go talk to that person? So we immediately identified a process issue. So then they go around and talk to the correct person, and that person would say, great, but I don't have the tools to fix that. Aha, we found a problem. What happens if we have a problem like this? We don't have the right tools. Write that down. Let's fix that. So we carried on in this way. We were doing a disaster recovery analysis process. We were figuring out where the system might fail. And by doing that in a diligent way, using the parsnips key phrase to say, parsnips, this is wrong, we were able to discover lots of problems and fix them way ahead of time, which made people feel an awful lot better and was much more reliable in servicing our customers and making sure that we didn't actually have a failure on Black Friday. Because guess what? Some systems did go down when people bought things for Christmas. And because we were able to create those tests ahead of time and verify that the processes we were using to monitor the software, to make sure the operation kept going, to make sure people actually got their Christmas presents, we were able to test those ahead of time, make sure they worked. So I commend that idea to you as well. A question you can ask is, what happens if? Okay, let me do a very surprising one, and then maybe a few more of your questions, and then I'll do my one of my favorites at the end. So the next one is very surprising because it's not like the ones we've just been talking about. The question comes from my co-author, Jeffrey Frederick, wrote Agile Conversations with me. If you want a copy of that book, just write to me. I'm happy to send you one, all about how to have conversations with your techies, not just asking questions, but lots more. And Jeffrey's insight is that he always opens every one-on-one the same way. And I've adapted what he does. He asks, are you happy? And that's a really good differentiator. Now, many people will say, yeah, I'm okay. And that tells you one thing. And some people say, yeah, I'm super happy. I'm really glad, we just solved this problem. We're really going to make a lot of money. We're really going to help some customers. And that tells you another thing. And sometimes people say, no, I'm not happy. And that tells you the most, right? That's really, really useful. So although as engineers, we tend to be kind of battle hardened and, a bit gruff, and, we tend to speak Klingon and other things like that put you off. We actually would like to be happy. And a really good thing to do to find out whether your engineers are functioning well is to ask them whether they're happy. Any kind of answer is informative. And I find it always very useful to open my one-on-ones with something like that. Actually, when I work with subcontractors, I always start by asking them, are they having fun? That's another variant of the same question. I want to get to feelings. I want to get to emotions. Even though they're hard-bitten engineers, I still want to know how are they feeling so that I can help them the best. If they're feeling miserable, not going to be much I can help them with, even if I'm a super technologist, which I'm not. And if they are feeling happy, I'm going to be able to motivate them much more successfully, and I'm going to be able to collaborate with them better. So there's a surprising example that might not be what you were thinking. Right, let me get a few more of your questions that you submitted ahead of time. It's like the chefs on TV, right? So they say, here's one I prepared earlier. So you guys had some you prepared for me earlier. Let me find those. So let's see. Danielle asks, should we be trying to get commitments for everything if software is in the realm of the complex? Well, Danielle's been listening to me and Dave Snowden. You understand that there are complex things and complicated things. I'm not going to go into that here, but in the realm of the complex, you don't know what the rules are. And you're trying to discover whether the software works the way you think, or whether people want to buy what you think they want to buy. Those are all unknowns, and you're operating in the world of there's some kind of rule, but you don't know what it is. And most software exists in that world. And that's what Danielle's referring to. And she's saying, should it be more of a range for the commitment? Should we be allowed to pull levers to meet a deadline, regulation, compliance, sales driven, etc.? Danielle, this could be its own session. Maybe I should do that. You've given me a good idea there. What do you do with deadlines in the world of the complex? And in particular, can you pull levers? Absolutely, you could pull levers. And let me go back to the why game for Danielle. The why game is of course, when you ask repeatedly, why are you doing that? Why is that a good idea? Why does that help our customers? If they can get to a business reason, then that's a lever for you to pull. For example, I'll just stick with the one I was using before. I was saying, the engineer might be changing how the login screen works, and now you enter your password and your name and so on. And the reason might be to help our customers address regulatory issues, not get on the front page in the newspaper and get hacked and so on. Well, if that's the reason, then there might be lots of things that you can pull in order to meet your deadline. You might say, gosh, it's really hard to enforce all the rules that our developers have asked us to implement and to enforce. But you know what? We actually, in order to be secure, we don't need all those rules. We only need this one and this one and this one to meet the regulation and to reduce the risk sufficiently. And so therefore we need fewer rules. Or you might say, what we need is an initial step. We need something we can publish a press release about. This actually happens more frequently than you might think, that somebody's building some software and what they really want is to be able to tell somebody, yeah, I did that. I'm not done, but I've done the first step. Well, that can be really useful. So if you're looking for some way to motivate your team to get a new piece of software done and to do it correctly, then often you can cut a lot of things if you know why you're doing it in the first place, because you can cut the right things that actually don't affect your outcome. So if you're asking, Danielle, can you pull some levers to get something done better, more efficiently on time? Absolutely, but only the ones that affect the that don't affect the business outcome. Right, Danielle, I hope I'm helping you. If that doesn't make sense, feel free to come back, or, if you're not able to be here and you want to post on the forum, that's absolutely fine. Get in touch with me and all the other members of the squadron as well. You can post it on the forum, get feedback there, drop me an email. I'm happy to find a way to get you an answer. But Daniel, it's a great question. Absolutely put a range for the commitment, but also pull levers. And I can tell you some fun stories. I got one about a marketing team that had a deadline. It turned out that all they needed was a demo. So, I can tell you some more examples if you want. Let's see. Oh, Nushin is here. Nushin had a question. Hey, Nushin, you didn't put it in the chat. That's okay. I can do it here. What are the criteria to quickly screen the technology solution fit for our purpose? Okay. So let me suggest one thing. I'm going to give you a kind of Zen answer there, Nushin, because I want to unask part of your question. You're looking for the technology solution that's best for you. Stop looking for that. There is nothing that's best. It's very, very rare. I mean, sometimes there's regulations. Sometimes there are, official rules or something like that to say, this is what you must do. Okay, well, then you must do it. So yeah, it's the best because it's the only choice. But very rarely do we have that in software. Usually there's many different solutions, many different providers, many different ways of approaching a problem, and they have trade-offs. They have bits that are good and some bits that are not good, and there's no best solution. There might be one that is best in a situation that meets the trade-offs are most acceptable out of all the different options for a particular customer, a particular situation, a particular feature. So stop being a betterist. That's my name for that, where you're saying, this is better, this is best, this is what we should do because it's the best practice. Never say that. Certainly don't say it around me or you're going to get in trouble. So that's my first advice, is to kind of unask that part of your question. But then you want to know, how do I screen the different choices? I mean, the developers say, well, I can think of 20 different ways to do that. What do you want, Nushin? You go, I'm not sure. I'm not a technologist. How do I know? We're back to the why game. Is you want to make sure they express all of those in business terms. And I had a wonderful example from one of my clients today. It was way too long. I had to help him get it down to a page instead of 5. But he had this wonderful explanation of why certain kinds of tech debt, that's a very developer-y kind of description of it, were actually of high business value. And he had wonderful stories. I have to anonymize carefully, so forgive me. I'm going to put this on the forum as well because I think it's such a great story. Great and terrible, is it curl your hair. He had a situation where one of the engineers made a big mistake. They just really screwed something up. They deleted something they shouldn't, put something in where they shouldn't, really made things very difficult. And after somebody made that mistake, they left the company. They quit. They resigned. And then, of course, everyone was sort of left in the lurch there. It's like, what do I do now? This is messed up, and I don't know how to fix it. And I'm getting the wrong information. I'm reporting the wrong thing. I'm unable to sell to my customers because of this mistake. And the person who made the mistake left. Boy, that's tough. And what the point that the person was making by having this example was that, hey, this could happen to us. We don't have the kinds of tests. I was referring to unit tests before. We don't have the kind of tests, the kind of spreading of knowledge. So it's not just one person who knows it, somebody else knows as well, that would allow us in a case like that, where someone left the company, and I don't know whether they left in a fit of pique or they left because they got ill or something else. I don't know the end of the story, and I don't really need to know. The point of the story is, hang on a second, somebody made a pretty big mistake and we didn't have a way to recover. And that's a really big problem. And it's really clear that that's something that we should do something about. So when you have that kind of clear business explanation of what the solution could be and what it could do for us, then you can understand what different actions there are. And it's very helpful document that I was reviewing. The person who was writing it, the author said, well, look, we could do this thing that kind of ignores the problem. We could do this thing that kind of covers up the problem, or we could solve it. And here are how here's the risk that each of those will introduce. For example, if there's a kind of mistake like this one that affects someone, or if there's some bad data sent to us from a customer, how would we recover from that? What would we do? Back to the question, what happens if, right? So he was asking that question as well. And answering that question in a very helpful way so that you could understand, for greater cost, we can have greater insurance, greater assurance that something bad won't happen. And if we spend less, then we'll have greater exposure, but we'll have more money we won't have spent. And that was really clear. So Nushin, I'd push for that kind of description. And if you need to play the why game a bit, that might help you. That would be a good thing to do. But push for that kind of explanation, that kind of clarity. And if you're not getting it, then go back, play the why game a bit, make sure you help the engineer. You might need to look to somebody else in the engineering team who might be a little more business focused. But what I find typically is that with the right prompting, engineers, and this guy's an engineer through and through, he's very technical, but he was describing in really nice business terms what the issues were, what the benefits were, what the trade-offs were. And when you can get that, screening is easy, because you just say, well, I could do this, it would cost me that, it gives me this protection, it gives me this additional option, and so on. Nushin says it was the best answer. Well, let's not fall prey to betterism, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Nushin. Now I'm going to do my final bit here. I'd love more questions. I'd love more suggestions and ideas. I always love those, and I like it when people disagree with me too. So feel free to pop in and say, no, you're all wrong, Squirrel. So I just have to read my handwriting here, which I've forgotten to do. Oh, yes. This goes back to, who was it? Somebody was asking about deadlines and whether you should be trying to meet them, should you be pulling levers, and so on. So here's the final question I will leave you with. I'm giving you official permission to ask this question. And this question is it done yet? Now, that question is a little bit like a child. I have 4-year-olds on the brain today. A 4-year-old sitting in the back of your car says, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Right? Asks that question often. Developers are just as irritated when you ask, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Why haven't I got my new feature, my new app, or whatever it is? Asking, is it done yet, over and over again is not that helpful. But asking, is it done yet? And how long will it take? And what are the obstacles? Are absolutely legitimate questions. The trick is to ask that question, then do something about it. Make sure that you're actually helpful. Because the problem with the 4-year-old asking, are we there yet? 4-year-old's not driving. 4-year-old isn't the one lost trying to figure out, what the GPS means by this road and, why is it one way and so on. The 4-year-old's just being annoying and asking, are we there yet? So if you're like that, you're not going to get much help, and you're not being much help to your engineering team. But it is perfectly legitimate to say, what would stop us getting this done this week? What's the obstacle? What's the problem? Well, the problem is that we can't figure out whether the customer wants A or B. You go, hey, I could phone the customer and ask them, would that help? And you say, of course it would, right? So that kind of discussion is a really productive one. Might have some conflict, might scare you, might scare the developers. Here he is again asking, is it done yet? But actually, last time she asked, is it done yet? We did something, so it could be done sooner. We should do that again. So this one comes with a little bit of a health warning. You have to not ask it in the 4-year-old annoying way without being helpful and just repeating it. But it is absolutely legitimate to ask, is it done yet? What can you show me? Because often they'll say, oh, yes, this part is done. It's 80% done. Never believe that. Make them show you. So you can say, okay, great. I have added something new we've been using the login screen as an example. We've added something new to the login screen. We've added something new to the payments page, whatever it is, and you can see it. Now that goes to the process I don't have time to talk about today called Elephant Carpaccio, where you're doing new releases and new changes as often as every day, so you can always keep track of where you are. And that's tremendously valuable and helpful. You don't have to be doing that. You don't have to move that direction. Although this question will move you that way, which is very helpful usually. But you have my official permission. You can play this video for any engineer who complains. Says, you're being that 4-year-old. You're asking me, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Say, is it done yet? And how can I help? What barrier can I remove? What skills are you missing? What do you need to do? If the answer is it's not done yet and I don't know and there's nothing blocking me, then we have a problem. But at least then it's clear. You say either we don't understand the barriers or we really misestimated this. We really got this wrong. Or something else is going wrong that I need to investigate. That would be a good time to call me, right? Because I could probably help you sort out what's actually going on if you get that answer. But much more frequently, asked in the right way, in a supportive way, making clear that you want to clear obstacles, somebody will say, well, the biggest problem is that idiot Squirrel. He keeps writing code that has bugs in it. Did you shut him up and stop him? Well, come fire that guy, Squirrel, and you might solve the problem, right? That would be very useful. It's not necessarily the most comfortable, but it's got a very useful answer for you. So I hope that's another example. Let me come back and just review for you what our questions are that we talked about. We talked about the why game, where you're being the productive 4-year-old, asking again and again why. So you try to get to money, try to get to some business result. That helps you know if your team is aligned with business goals. Ask to read the code, ask specifically to read tests. If you have to, just read the names of the tests, but make sure your team has some tests so they're verifying they don't break stuff all the time, and then make sure that those tests actually match what you want it to do, what you want the software to do. And if you do those things, then you got a nice mechanism for keeping track of your team. I have a wonderful example. I don't have time for it here, but it's a great example. It's on the forum of some safety software that turned out to have a really nice way for you to check the tests that didn't even involve reading anything. So check that out on the forum. I'll ask Laura to connect to link to it if we haven't done that yet. Ask what happens if, and I have my parsnips example where we were testing something, we were checking out what happens if we can't get to the database or we don't get the right data and so on. We said parsnips before each thing to practice and find out what did happen if, and then we were able to address that and mitigate it. Are you happy? One of my favorite tests for whether a team is motivated and engaged and able to help help customers and so on. And finally, is it done yet? This comes with a health warning. You have to be careful. You have to ask that in a productive way. But as long as you're ready to clear some obstacles, that's a really useful question to ask. And I give you official permission to ask it. Okay, great. I had fun doing this and suggesting some great questions that you can ask the people in your technology team. Those of you who are here, I loved your comments and engagement here. People who sent me some questions ahead of time, I appreciate that. Happy to continue discussing those. And we're back again next week, and I can't remember, what are we doing? Are we going to be able to stop coding? Can we fire all these developers? Can we have the computers do all the work? Is ChatGPT going to write all our software? Hint, no, that's the answer. So come back next week. We'll have another event. I believe that's what next week is. If it isn't, check it out on squirrelsquadron.com, and I'll put that up here in the comments. That's the place where you can sign up for more of these. If you enjoyed listening to me talking about how to ask questions, then you can listen to me in a few weeks talking about managing smug people and how to stop coding and lots of other things. If I can actually spell squadron. Squadron. No, I can't spell my own community name. I better do that carefully. There we go. Now I've managed to spell it right, I think. I should be the world's greatest authority on spelling squirrel, and I think I've done it right now. Squadron.com. There we go. So squirrelsquadron.com is the place to go. Oh, it's here on the screen. I didn't even need to do that. Guess what? So go to the website on the screen, and you can sign up for lots more of these fun events, which I really appreciate doing. And I have a blast, so that's the only thing that matters. No. Glad to have all of you here, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much, or I'll see you on the forum. Have a wonderful day.